Catherine Hamlin AC was educated in Frensham School before studying medicine at the University of Sydney, and she graduated in 1946. Working at Crown Street Women's Hospital in the late 40s, she met fellow doctor Reginald Hamlin, and they married in 1950. 8 years later, Catherine and Reg Hamlin travelled to Ethiopia after answering an advertisement in the Lancet calling for doctors. On the evening of their arrival, a fellow gynaecologist told them, "The fistula patients will break your hearts." And indeed they did. They had never seen an obstetric fistula case before, which is a horrific and preventable childbirth injury, that there was little or no treatment available for in Ethiopia. Catherine and Reg Hamlin pioneered the surgical technique to repair fistula, and in 1974 they opened the Addis Ababa Fistula Hospital, dedicated to treating specifically this injury. Since her husband's death in 1993, Catherine has continued and expanded the work in the hospital, lobbying and travelling extensively to raise funds so that all patients can receive free treatment. 2019 marks 60 years since Dr. Catherine and Reg Hamlin first arrived in Ethiopia. Today, Hamlin Fistula Ethiopia is a healthcare network of over 550 Ethiopian staff servicing 6 fistula hospitals, a rehabilitation centre, and the Hamlin College of Midwives, deploying midwives into remote areas to prevent the injury during birth. To date, over 60,000 women have had their lives restored. In January this year, Catherine also celebrated her 95th birthday, a true milestone. It's remarkable that for 60 of her 95 years, Catherine has been completely committed to transforming the lives of some of the most vulnerable women in the world. These women really are her life story. Catherine has received numerous honours for her humanitarian work, including being twice nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. She still lives in a small cottage on the grounds of the main hospital in Addis Ababa. Her work is funded entirely by generous supporters around the world, and her dream is to eradicate fistula forever. At this stage of her life, Catherine is no longer travelling, and her niece, Dr. Alison Morgan, is here with us today to accept the award on her behalf. Alison has more than 25 years' experience in global health research and practice with expertise in maternal and newborn health, primary health care, and child and adolescent health. Alison has undertaken consultancies for the World Health Organization, UNICEF and DFAT, and currently sits on the board of the Catherine Hamlin Foundation. Please join me in congratulating Dr. Catherine Hamlin, AC, and welcoming Dr. Alison Morgan to the stage.
To also acknowledge the traditional owners of this land on which we're meeting, the Gadigal people, and I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. On behalf of my aunt, Dr. Catherine Hamlin, I want to thank you all for this amazing recognition exemplified in the excellence in women's leadership. 60,000 women in 60 years is an extraordinary testimony of lives transformed. Kath will be waking up soon in her home that was hand-built. It's made out of mud bricks beside the river at the base of the hill on which the hospital in Addis Ababa sits. She stopped operating about 5 years ago, which was when she was 90, which was a bit scary. And she did say, well, I'll keep going as long as my hands aren't shaking. But nowadays she lives a very quiet life, made beautiful by the glorious garden that she has built up, which is also part of the healing for the women that come to the hospital. I'd like to just spend a few minutes thinking. I was reflecting on this award and the characteristics of her leadership. She was always very self-effacing and always would be amazed at an event like this, but she's a real mix of absolute forthright speech. She'll say exactly what she thinks, with a sort of real humility, undergirded by deep love of her work. That passion that we've been talking about today is a defining characteristic and would be one of her 3 words, I'm sure. And I think that if I characterise her leadership, it first was seeing the challenge and recognising what was in front of them when they first saw their first fistula patient. For those who don't know what an obstetric fistula is, if you're pregnant and you have a baby, the worst thing that can happen is that you or your baby die. But very close second to that would be the injury of obstetric fistula. 1 in 20 women will have an obstructed labour, and that's fine if you can get access to a caesarean section or other assisted delivery. If you live in a remote community where you're 10 hours walk from the nearest road, a 10-hour bus trip to the nearest hospital, you take your chances at home when you are having your baby. And if you're one of those 1 in 20 women, a number of those women will go on to have very long protracted labour, during which usually the baby will die. The death of the baby causes the delivery to proceed, but the pressure of the baby's head for the days of labour that have gone unrelieved cause a hole between generally the bladder and the vagina, sometimes also the rectum and vagina, leaving a woman incontinent, day in, day out. And they've all just lost their baby. You know, it is the worst obstetric injury. Reg and Kath, both obstetricians, had never seen this in Australia because we do have services. Even in hard-to-reach places, we don't see obstetric fistula because women eventually can get to the care they need. But in 1959 in Ethiopia, that wasn't the case. They saw their first woman a week after they arrived, and then they started working out, we need to do something. Previous people had said, oh, that's just too hard. They developed surgical techniques. They advocated at the hospital they were working at to have 3 dedicated beds. These were the beds for the fistula patients. Word got out that they were starting to treat them, and women started coming. So they had 3 beds. They had more than 3 patients. So they thought, oh, we'll build a hostel for women waiting for these 3 beds. They built the hostel. When they had 100 women in the hostel, they thought, this is ridiculous. We will build a dedicated hospital, which was opened in 1974. So it was really marked by this persistence and passion. And the other second characteristic is the resilience or stubbornness. Our family motto is be right and persist, and if you can't be right, just persist. They have been there 60 years. They went for a 3-year gig. Whoever's haven't taken a 3-year contract, be warned, it might turn into your lifetime. They lasted through 3 regimes, a different, incredible military coup in the early 70s, and throughout that grew this work. They have shown, and Kath continues to show, incredible flexibility. They were the ambulance at the bottom of the hill when they started. These women were desperate and needed immediate care. But over the 60 years of their work, they have turned that curative practice into a promotive and preventive practice. There's a 20% year-on-year decline now in obstetric fistula presentations in parts of Africa where it has been a really big problem, and in Ethiopia in particular, simply because of this work. Now there are 5 regional hospitals. Yesterday, the 9th graduating class of Hamlin midwives graduated and are all going back into remote rural communities. Now when that remote rural woman goes to her local clinic, there's a midwife that can assist her delivery, can recognise if it's an obstructed labour, can get her to the care that she needs. There's equal commitment, I have to say, from the Ethiopian government to really support the work and to strengthen their own maternal health services. But this has been this amazing program that has grown from this single patient walking into a clinic 60 years ago to this 60,000 women legacy of lives saved, plus endless number of women who haven't had to even face this because their services were made available. Finally, I think the idea of partnership and capacity building. One of the most recognised fistula surgeons is a woman called Mamiti, who came as a fistula patient to the hospital about 55 years ago. No education, first baby, had a fistula, came for repair, decided to stay and help other women, learnt to read, was serving in the hospital, helping other women. And it's a characteristic of the care there that women are served by women who know what it is like to be incontinent 24/7. She then started helping in theatre, did a course on learning how to do sterilisation, started assisting Reg and Kath in surgery, started doing the surgery, then started training other obstetricians in the surgery, and is received a medal from the Royal College of Obstetricians in the UK for her work. So that capacity development and that support of others was really exemplified in their work. But more widely, the partnership of people, generous people in Australia who have made this work possible. And that is very true today. Undergirding all of this is her overwhelming love for her work, for her patients, and for the people that work in that across the Hamlin, Fistula, Ethiopia hospitals. And I think keeping in front of her always is the woman who, instead of experiencing the joy of a new baby, faced this sort of incredibly difficult condition that leads to enormous social exclusion that no woman should be called on to bear. So on behalf of her, on behalf of Dr. Catherine Hamlin, I thank you for this award, and I invite you to share her vision to eradicate fistula forever. Thanks.
Thank you. You've got this beautiful award. We'll wrap it up and take it, but we'll just keep you up here. We will package this up and ensure that it does get to Catherine. And thank you so much for educating all of us, for sharing the story behind the scenes. We were there with you, I think, when you shared that, and to really pass on our admiration and congratulations to your aunt.
Thank you.
Thank you.